Hi guys, welcome to the Armageddon channel. My name's Alex Garner. Now today we're going to be working on the Sherman, the half-track and this little Citroen that you can see behind me. We've got a bit of film work coming up, so we've got to make sure all these vehicles are hopefully running mint, which is why we've got Gidge today. Say hello, Gidge.
Hello.
So hopefully we're going to have a little look around these vehicles, start them up and see what we can do.
Okay, so we're inside. The last time the vehicle was out, there was a complaint of a smell of fuel, possible fuel leak, and was not running very well. So we're going to just fire her up and see if we can't see where the fuel is leaking from, and hopefully this is going to be part and parcel of why she's not running very good.
If you can remember how to turn
remember how to, what was it, this one out?
Yeah. At least it didn't flood the engine.
And we are noticing a bit of leaking around the car. So this appears to be the end of the feed point, and there we go, it's coming straight out of the freezer. Straight out of the freezer. Okay, so there's the first fault confirmed. We've got fuel leaking out of the breather, which means we need to get that carb off, strip it down, and see what's sticking in there. Suspect probably the float is sticking down, or the needle valve is jammed in position, therefore allowing too much fuel into the pot. So we'll get that cleaned up and we'll see what we've got.
And while Gidge is taking that off, I've also been told that apparently this is our overflow storage, vehicle storage, if you can see here. You can see we've got a few 432s and, well, bits and bobs of everything. A 439 there, there's a Bedford truck and a couple 434s and another truck in the corner there. And we've got to move everything around, partly because we need to get this one out, the Citroen out, but also because, well, we've not really made the best use of space. So, yeah, we reckon we can get a few more vehicles in here. Hopefully we're going to have an extension in the museum later this year, but who knows for the time being.
Okay, so we're in. We noticed that the float does not appear to be floating. We're going to have to whip that all out and have a look at that float and see why she's sinking.
What do you reckon it could be?
We might have a little hole in the brass float there. It's taking in fuel into it, causing it to weigh too much.
Now, while Gidge is just getting the carb off, a quick bit of history about this Citroen. Now, this is a Citroen U23, and you're probably wondering, why on earth is it painted in German colours? I think they started creating them in 1935, and obviously during the war, France got invaded by Germany, so a lot of French vehicles ended up getting used for the German war effort. I think around 6,000 of them got captured by the Germans, and then obviously as the war went on, they obviously used in French manufacturing and they started to make more of these trucks. Now this one we actually got from a French farmer quite a few number of years ago, and the actual paint, when they originally took off the paint, they found the original German paint underneath, you know, the sort of, I can't remember what the name of the paint is, but the sort of greeny brown paint. Fortunately we couldn't save it, so that's why we've repainted it this colour. Now the hope is to eventually paint it back to that colour, but like everything, it's just getting the time. But we want to get it mechanically sound first, which is why we've got Gidge today. And it looks like he's already got it off.
So there's your carburettor, we're all off. We'll now get her over to the workshop bench and we'll get her stripped down into bits and see if we can't see what's causing it to overfill the fuel chamber. What we've essentially got is a fuel chamber here where the fuel is coming in, gets filled up to the top, lifts the float and stops any more fuel entering. Obviously then as the fuel is pulled into the carburettor, mixed with the air to go into the engine, it will deplete this chamber, which then releases that valve and allows it to fill again, keeping you a good supply of fuel ready to be used at any time.
What he's doing here is, hopefully, by doing that, the float should come out.
We should be able to pop the float out and just have a little look at that float and see if it is sinking with the weight of the fuel or if there's something else holding it from sealing.
I'm not going to lie, I think the car needs a bit of clean.
It wants a real good overhaul, doesn't it?
Yes, but I don't think it has been done anything since World War II, so that's World War II grime, that is. How's it looking?
So there's your float. So what you tend to get with this float is obviously made in two halves, and then it is lead soldered together, although it won't be lead these days, but it probably was back then. And what tends to happen is sometimes that lead can crack, which allows the fuel to come in. A little shake, and there's no fuel in there, which is making me think it's more that needle valve. So we're going to take a little look at that now.
And there's your valve.
So there's our valve, and that's the sealed needle end. So inside there we have a little port, and this simply slams in and closes that port, not allowing the fuel pass. When that fuel level drops, as I say, the float will drop, allowing that to release, allowing the fuel to pass by, and then again when it closes. So we're going to take all this out and give it a right good clean up, and we'll see you back in a minute.
You guys look inside. There's a load of rubbish in there, a load of grime. As you can see, look at that.
Look at that. So that's all going through your carb. And we've got to get that cleaned out. What we've got here is we've got the carb off, we've got on the bench, we're stripping it down and we're looking, and as you can see I've just made a start and effort of cleaning up this top choke flap here, and you can see the state of the carb is in a very, very poor state. So we're going to have to give this a right thorough clean, a deep clean out. Essentially what we've got here is how the carb works. It's quite simply we've got air coming in, fuel as we spoke about into the bowl. The fuel travels through. As we bring the accelerator on, we lift up the valve, allowing the fuel to come through. And straight down in the bottom here, you can just see that little pipe there. Let me screwdriver in just to show you. That's where the fuel travels through. So as the air rushes in, we can see how the carb is narrowing, making the Venturi effect, which is obviously pulling straight down through this little pipe, which drags the fuel out of the opening, straight down to mix into the fuel and air, straight through into the manifold that then goes into the engine. And that's your basics on how a carb would work. So now we've got the carb in pretty much to bits. It's now just a case of methodically going through, cleaning her all out, getting everything back as clean as we can get her. As you can see, we've got a lot of dirt coming off there. It's been long overdue. So hopefully, once we get her back together, we should notice a big difference. Got this carb all back together now. We've got fresh gaskets in there. We've refitted her back to the manifold. We've filled up the bowl. So we're ready to start and see if this leak is resolved.
Yeah, and as you can see, she's now running a lot smoother. We'll take her for a bit of a spin in just a second, but before we do so, we've got to get the Bedford OY moved, and then we're going to have a play around and move the rest of this stuff as well. This is the Bedford OY. Now this one isn't actually ours, it's a friend of ours, meaning that we've always got to be a little bit more careful when we drive it. But luckily, she's a very sweet truck. She started up straight away. Now, Nitro is going to hopefully bring us out. As you see, it's quite close to the wall. One done, and now 8 more to go. Now the M8, which is always easy to get into. There we go. Since she's going to be the first one back in, we'll park her somewhere over there. Oh, nice, now we'll get the rest of it. This 439, I just bought it the other day, and it is honestly one of the most beautiful 439s you've ever seen. We'll have a little glance inside. I'll show you guys in the back while Gidge warms it up, and honestly, this one, hopefully we're going to be extending the museum later this year, or if not, beginning of next year. And this one hopefully is going to have a pride of place, because look how lovely she is. I mean, you've probably never seen a 439 with the amount of things in as this one has. You can see Gidge at the front, he's just quickly checking it over. Hopefully make sure it's ready, and then we'll start her up and get this one moved. And I think after this one, we'll move the Citroen. So the moment of truth for the Citroen, hopefully it'll be in good condition, and well, hopefully she'll run sweet. Big question, Gidge. Have you ever driven this before?
No!
Straight back. And you stalled it. 434 just here. It hasn't had its pack serviced yet, so taken out and looked at. So instead of turning it on, just in case, we're going to use the A-frame and we're going to tow it out using the tractor.
Member's got no brakes.
And whoa! And just like that, absolutely perfect parking. Now for the M8 next to it, and then the Bedford OY. As we go. And now that we've got these three in, we're now ready for the rest of them.
Okay, so we're happy with that. That's running a lot better. We've got all the vehicles out, we've moved round, she's moved back in, she's running a lot sweeter than us. So now it's up to the top to go and have a look at the Sherman and the half track and see what we've got with those. Yeah, you want to be on camera, don't you?
So this is our half track just behind me, and you can sort of see by the mess that Gidger's already made a start. So what I'm going to do, he's going to quickly explain to you guys what he's done and what the next steps are, because we thought it would be a nice, easy, get in, turn it on, and it should start, but unfortunately, it's not gone like that.
As you can see, it didn't quite go to plan. Came up here, we've put a new battery on it. Got a new battery, the battery was dead, we put a new battery on there. Unfortunately, after we put the new battery on, we also noticed that it was turning over extremely slow. So we thought it was going to be a nice case of just clean up a few of the plug wires, a few of the plug leads in there, get them cleaned up and what have you. But unfortunately, it was turning over a bit slow, so we've ended up having to pull the starter off. If we come round, we can have a look. So what we found was, although it was turning over extremely slow and wasn't quite turning, what we actually had was a lot of high resistance between these terminals and connections. They were actually starting to glow quite hot, so we've had to remove these, remove the starter, clean them all up. We're going to lubricate everything and then get it back on, and hopefully she'll be spinning over at a normal speed, and then we'll get the rest of those plug wires cleaned up and we'll see if we can't get it to fire up. So we've got the starter motor back on. We've got a set of leads on there. We've just got to make one more king lead, but we've got the starter on. We're going to see if she'll spin over now a lot freer, see if we've got a bit more speed on that cranking, and hopefully see if we can prime the fuel up. We've got a nice new fuel filter on there so we can actually see through the bowl and see that fuel coming up. So fingers crossed, we'll have her running.
Ready?
Go.
You want to turn the power off?
Oh yes. All good.
Got fuel coming up. It just started to come up then, so yeah, we'll just give it a minute later.
Yeah,
it's still quite cool, so.
Don't overheat start motor.
And there you can see, she's finally got a bit of fuel pressure up, straight into the carb, and she's running. And she doesn't sound half bad.
Okay, so got straight up to 40 psi oil pressure. That's really good. Little bit of choke on 'cause it's still cold. And really picking up. Beautiful.
So while Gidge is just quickly packing away, a little bit of history about this vehicle. Now, this is the M16 half-track. It's an American self-propelled anti-aircraft weapon which was built between 1942 and 1944. Now, I believe they created roughly about 3,500 of these vehicles, although they did create obviously a lot more half-tracks in general. Made by the White Motor Company, it weighs in at roughly 9 tons and has a top speed of up to 40 miles per hour. It's powered by a White 160 AX 6-cylinder petrol engine. Now, a bit of an interesting fact, the M16 was nicknamed the Meat Chopper because of this. Now, these panels pretty much would come up and down, allowing the Browning 50 cal machine guns up top to be used against the infantry, which, as you can imagine, would make quite a bit of a mess. Interesting enough, it's technically a war crime according to the Geneva Convention to use that against infantry. I can imagine they probably didn't care about that when the enemy are charging towards them. Now that we've had a look at the half track and it's all okay, it's now onto the M4 105 Sherman. So I think the lads are at the back of it already. Hopefully, it's not going to take too long to get this one started and working.
We're about ready to make a start on the Sherman. With it being a radial engine, obviously some of the cylinders are upside down, so the oil will filter down and it does tend to hydraulic the engine. So the first thing we want to do is take the spark plugs out of the bottom cylinders just to make sure they're not full of oil before we even attempt to start trying to hand crank her over. However, we've just noticed these do have the original plugs in, which means we do need to get a special tool to get in there to try and get these plugs out, which hopefully Nitro's just gone down to the workshop to go and see if he can remember where he's put it. So that could be interesting.
Yes, but the other issue is it was about 6 years since we
It was about 6 years since he last... Yeah, so it could be interesting.
You go to a very fine point, and that's what burns out. Because if they're this sort,
Of course,
you got a fairly good...
Thinner, the electrode.
Yeah, you should be okay.
First job, we just got to get the leads off the top of the plugs, just like so, and then we can get the socket in there to pull those plugs out, and hopefully we will see if we've got any oil in there. Oh, just melt straight down in a puddle of oil.
You could move the drip tray. That'd be
That's what I should have done. If you're not covered in oil, what are you covered in?
There's this first spark plug out. A bit oily. Now these are at the bottom cylinder heads, and being a radial engine, that's where any excess oil is going to be going down to. So we want to make sure that they're not full of oil prior to us cranking the engine over, otherwise you could hydraulic the engine. And they are quite wet, so there will be oil in there, because there always is. But we'll get it. It looks alright there. Give them a clean up. It should be okay.
We've got the plugs out. Looking on the inside, there is oil down that cylinder. So the first thing first, we're just going to suck all that oil out, and then we'll re-put the plugs in. Then we should be able to hand crank her and make sure that oil doesn't go down the inlet, down the exhaust when we open up the valve. Okay, so we've got it all back together now. So we've had the plugs out. We've sucked all the oil out from inside the bore. There wasn't actually as much as what we first anticipated, which is a good sign. We've got the plugs back in, everything's all built back up. So the only thing left to do now is just hand crank her over. It's roughly 25 revolutions to every 1 engine revolution. So we're going to give that a good couple of spins, try and get the engine to turn a couple of times over, just to make sure it's not seized, it's not free, it's not hydro-locking or anything like that. So.
Good little workout.
You can feel it coming up on the compression and feel it coming off the compression, which is a great sign. And that is showing that we're not hydro-locking. And we'll carry on with that until we've got all the way around there. Unfortunately, we're not actually going to start it today. The main reason being is we will not start it inside the building, so it needs to be pulled outside. And also we're going to wait for Stuart to arrive to do the bit on the inside and fire her over. But she is now ready to be fired up.
A quick note, the reason we don't start it inside is because being a radial, they're very prone to setting on fire. And as you can imagine, being in the museum with a load of other things and setting on fire isn't the best.
That's fair. Yep.
So that's why we don't ever run it inside.